Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. If you don't know who I am, my name is Caitlin Elliott, and I cover true crime cases every single Tuesday, and that will be right here on my channel. So if this is something that interests you, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button and turn on that notification bell so that you never miss any of my videos. So, as we all know, I'm just going to jump into today's case, and today's case, as you can tell by the title, is one that just happened pretty recently. You know, it's not one that has like a lot of information out there. I had to really dig through, watch a couple documentaries, read a couple newspaper articles. Like, it was just really difficult to find a lot of information. But thankfully, I was able to find something, and I'm now going to be able to present it to you. So I'm so excited. So with today's case, like I said, this is really recent. This happened back in April of 2022, so just a few months ago. And this is the case of Lilly Peters. So in April of 22, like I said, just a few months ago, Eliana Lilly Peters, she was just last seen on the 24th of that month between 1 and 3 p.m. at her Chippewa Falls home in Wisconsin, where she lived with her mother. That day, she decided she was going to go rollerblading, and when she would go out, you know, like no one really had, you know, any feeling that something bad was going to happen. She often would rollerblade, and no one thought anything of it. So, however, 6 hours later, after 6 hours, you know, she would still not return home, and that's when everything just went downhill from there. So, because of how recent this case really is, it's extremely difficult to find good information out there. Like I said, I had to search through so many documentaries and newspaper articles. So, you know, I'm going to add a disclaimer as well and a warning. So, this case does involve violence towards a child, and if this is something that makes you uncomfortable, please step out and watch another one of my videos. And, you know, I won't really mind, but it does involve violence towards a child, and it can be extremely difficult to listen to. So, viewer discretion is advised. So, there, just put that out there. 10-year-old Eliana Peters, also known as Lilly, she was reported missing at 9 p.m. the night of Sunday, April 24th of 2022. She was last seen walking home from her aunt's house that was only a few blocks away from her home, and alongside of her she was pushing her bike because she had ridden her bike to her aunt's house. Normally, Lilly, she would have walked there, but today she was riding her bike because it was a lot quicker to get places on. Like, you can go down the street and around the corner in less than like 3 minutes on a bike than it would take for you to walk there. So she was living with her father at the time, and her mother, named Jennifer, was said to live about 60 miles away from her home. On that particular day, her father, named Alex, you know, he was a little concerned a little bit whenever he found out that Lilly was out a lot later than normal. And this really concerns him because she's always good about coming home on time. She's a 10-year-old little girl. She would know better than to upset her family like that. He quickly called the authorities, and he reported his young daughter missing. Though when he did so, there was no real action that was actually taken by the authorities at this time. In the majority of these cases, in order for an Amber Alert to be pushed out to the public, there are certain rules and protocols that must be followed. For example, the child has to be 17 years or younger, must be in serious danger, and there must be an accurate description of the abductor when the Amber Alert goes out. But because, you know, there was no witnesses to her possibly being abducted, or there was no witnesses to a vehicle that was around the area, they couldn't put out an Amber Alert for 10-year-old Lilly because she did not meet the qualifications. There were also a lot of people who were extremely frustrated about the fact that there was no Amber Alert, and the community believed the authorities were not doing everything they possibly could to help bring Lilly home. The local community where Lilly lived, they decided they were going to go out and search for the little girl themselves, since the police really weren't doing anything that they could. So during that night of them going out and searching, they found Lilly's bike, and it was found tossed like upside down, and this was found by her father in a cemetery which was nearby the family property, which is extremely eerie and disturbing to think about when you find out like what exactly happened throughout the case. The following day, the authorities decided to bring in search dogs and drones as well to go and do a thorough search of the area. And the authorities then decide to make their way down this little hiking trail because they saw it on the side. They're like, oh, well, it's possible she could have gone down here. She could have fallen, twisted the ankle. Maybe she's hurt. So just after 9 a.m. on April 25th of 2022, Lilly Peters' body would soon be discovered on that same trail that they were walking on. Lilly's body was discovered not far away from the location where her bike was at, and this was close to her family home. The hiking trail was in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin. Her family was then notified about the discovery, and they were absolutely devastated by this news because Lilly was just a sweet and innocent little girl who really didn't deserve what had happened to her. She didn't deserve to die. There was an audio clip that was then submitted to the local authorities in regards to this murder, and in this clip the mother was heard just wailing in despair. Like, I listened to it, it was just so heartbreaking to hear. She was wailing in despair. She was just so upset that her little girl had been discovered deceased. So not only that, but Jennifer, the mother, she was actually the one who stumbled across her own daughter's body. And because of this, it actually literally like broke her heart. She was so upset. And I can only imagine just how devastating that has to be to go out and search for your missing child, and then you're the one that stumbles across their deceased body. Like, that's just so hard. I don't know how anyone can get over something like that. Not long after Lilly's body was discovered, the community began its search for her killer. So they wanted to do this because they wanted to bring the family justice. She was a little girl who didn't deserve to die, and they just wanted to help the family get closure to the case. The police decided they were going to interview the neighbors in the area about, Lilly's disappearance, the last time that she was seen, and just any sightings of Lilly. And this was when one neighbor claimed to have seen the little girl walking down a path, and she was followed by a teenage boy. So this teenage boy was really close by to her, and he was riding a hoverboard to try to keep up with her. After her body was discovered, many neighbors claimed that they now feared for their lives because they believed that there was now a sadistic killer out on the loose. This same trail was used by multiple children in the area to go to walk to school. They would take this trail up to the school, and now that this murder had occurred and her body was found on that trail, a lot of parents did not feel safe allowing their children to walk on that trail anymore. No one had any idea as to why the police had completely surrounded the neighborhood, and people would come up and they would ask, why are you guys here? Like, what's going on? This was before, it was announced that Lilly had in fact passed away, and the police, obviously they could not give out any information about what had happened, and this just absolutely infuriated the community because they really talked to one another about what was always going on, and they were upset that no one would tell them what was happening. Pretty soon the authorities were already calling this a homicide, and unfortunately they would not realize just how truly dark and twisted this case would turn in just a matter of days. 10-year-old Lilly Peters was discovered to have been beaten and strangled to death, and after that, the perpetrator had deliberately assaulted her innocent and deceased body. I think the term for that is necrophilia, and like a necrophiliac would do. And her body had just been located only a half a mile away from her family home, nearby the Jacob Lennon Kugel Brewing Company. And then once all this information came to the public, the community was absolutely horrified that a child killer, someone who was out there killing children, was on the loose and could be targeting their child next. Chippewa Falls was said to be well known for its beautiful and aesthetic atmosphere, and is home to multiple rivers and lakes and just state parks, and there was an established heritage. It was just a beautiful place to live. There was not a lot of danger, not a lot of crime, and this really shook the community to its core. They had no idea why this would happen, and at the time, everyone was scared that someone would be targeting their child next. Like, if a pedophile was out there doing this to Lilly, who's to say they wouldn't stop at Lilly and move on to other kids? A lot of residents, they started to jump to social media as they posted their concerns about their child's safety since the killer of Lilly had not been caught yet. Residents also wanted justice for her, and they wanted to do everything they possibly could to help catch the killer. The Chippewa County coroner named Ron Patton, he stated that the official autopsy done on the little girl came back saying that Lilly had actually died from both a mix of blunt force trauma to the head and manual strangulation. However, it can take up to 6 weeks for, the official medical report to be released to the public to verify what they were saying. So this could mean that there was additional causes of death as well. This obviously completely shattered her entire family, and she was their only child, and no one knew why anyone would do such a thing to Lilly. Once it became public news that the police were surrounding the home of the aunt, like they just showed up and were surrounding the home of the aunt, it was now obvious that there was more to the story than what meets the eye. So, a 14-year-old boy named Carson Petersberger, he was then arrested for the murder of Lilly Peters. And when this came to light, the local community was just shocked that a 14-year-old boy could be charged with such a brutal crime. They had to be incorrect. This had to have been a grown adult that did this. There's no way that another child could do this to an innocent little girl. So, like I said, they believed that the killer had to be someone in their 30s and their 40s, had to have been a registered sex offender, had to be someone lurking around the area, and they did not think that this kid could be in any way responsible. However, this boy was not a stranger to neither Lilly nor her parents because this was actually Lilly's 14-year-old cousin. Carson was then charged by police with 3 counts of in relation to the death of his 10-year-old little cousin, Lilly Peters. These counts were said to have been first-degree intentional homicide, first-degree sexual assault, and first-degree sexual assault of a child. Carson's case was then officially sent off to adult court, and this was in the area, which meant that he would be charged as an adult for his crimes if they did in fact find him guilty. A lot of people really hoped that Carson's lawyer wouldn't beg him to be dropped down to a juvenile, back down to juvenile court, but because it said that there are actually no sentences for murder in a juvenile court. So if they found that he was guilty, they really wanted him to get the maximum sentence. Dozens of people traveled to Lilly's elementary school that day, where a shrine was then set up outside of the school in memoriam for the little girl. A lot of the community members were still in shock that a 14-year-old boy was being charged with the murder of this little girl, and not only that, but he was charged with sexually assaulting and strangling her to death, like his own cousin. When Carson was brought into court for his trial, they only referred to him as his initials CP because he was 14 years old and was thus a minor and his privacy had to be protected at the time. He was then sentenced to prison with a $1 million bond, and he was an 8th grader at the time. He had just finished, he was still in 8th grade. He had just turned 14 years old not too long ago, and this came as a shock to all of his classmates, all of his teachers, anyone who knew Carson. Whenever they found out he was being sentenced to prison for the murder of his own cousin, everyone's minds just blew. So when it comes to most child murders, the person behind the crime is usually like a creepy grown-ass man, and this man is a pedophile and not like another child. Like another child normally doesn't kill a child, you know what I mean? So this case, this really made the case stand out to the authorities because it was completely out of the norm at the time. The 14-year-old Carson Peters then fully admits to the police while in custody that his full intention that day was to rape and kill Lilly, as quoted from him. He claimed to the courts how he had actually lured his little cousin Lilly off the trail that day and was just snapped. He just furiously started punching her really hard in the stomach. And as he did so, she fell onto the ground and she was crying. She was very upset. And while she was on the ground crying, Carson forced himself upon her. And then once she was just scared and crying, he decided that he was just going to manually strangle her to death. After he had strangled her, he hit her over the head as hard as he could with many objects. I think they said it was like a piece of wood or something to make sure that Lilly was in fact deceased. And then he performed multiple acts of necrophilia on his own cousin's body before he just left her there, packed up all of his stuff, and went back to the home like nothing even happened. I had to take a deep breath because that's just, wow. That just blows my damn mind. The judge that day granted the request for bail, even though the defense stated he didn't actually need bail because he was 14 and he didn't know how to drive, so therefore he wouldn't have been a flight risk. So the bail, however, was set to $1,000, and the courts decided it was best to try Carson as a juvenile rather than to charge him as an adult. Because once a case is moved to juvenile court, it becomes extremely private and protected from reporters or anything like that, from the family, from anyone. Carson would later go on to appear in virtual court with his lawyers in front of a judge, where he then admitted that he was the one who committed the murder. He had, he was like, yeah, it was me, I did it. And this is gonna blow your mind, but he had actually been planning to murder Lilly for some time. This was premeditated. The courts then, once they heard that he had actually been planning to kill Lilly the second they left the house, they started walking down on the trail, and this was when he decided to go off the path so they could explore the area. And Lily's a little girl, she loves to explore and all that stuff, so she didn't really mind. She was super excited to come with him. That's her older cousin. She loved him, thought of him as a brother. Once they got to the trail, he hit her in the stomach, knocked her onto the ground, and hit her 3 times in the head. After he beat her, he admitted to having raped her and then strangled her, which, ultimately scared Carson, according to him. So he turned around and fled back home and acted like, nothing ever happened. He took a shower and continued on with his day. When it was discovered that Lilly was missing, Carson had panicked and he ran back to where he hid the body. He then decided to move her body away from where he had left it, and he tried to cover it up the best he could with different types of leaves and twigs to try and conceal the body. Lily's body was then discovered to be completely nude from the waist down, and it was revealed that she had also suffered from blunt force trauma to the head, from some type of blow, probably from the stick that he said he had beaten her with. Along with all of this, she was also said to have had, it gets really intense, so just warning now. She was said to have had multiple bite marks on her buttocks from this brutal attack. For someone who was 14 years old, it seemed like he had a lot of pent up, sexual tension and anger and aggression, and he just unleashed it all on Lilly because maybe she was an easy target and she, admired him or whatever. But, it blows my mind how a 14-year-old boy could do something like this. So, if this wasn't just horrific enough, once her official autopsy was conducted, it would go on to reveal that her rape was actually so violent that it had actually ripped her genitals in half, completely wide open. Oh, and this is a sweet, innocent, just 10-year-old little girl who seriously didn't deserve the violence that was forced upon herself. And it's just, she loved this guy, she loved Carson, and she admired him. Like, it's disgusting if you think of it. It's just so awful. It really is. Because, like, she trusted him enough to go out for this walk and go places with him. Like, oh my God, you know, he's going to protect me, make sure nothing happens to me. And then he turns around and causes harm to her. Like, oh my God, I cannot even imagine. So, there was also then sperm that was discovered on Lily's body, obviously because she had been raped. And this sperm directly linked Carson to the murder as their main suspect at the time. It was then revealed to the court that he had actually threatened to harm Lily before in the past. But like I said, like, if this was the case, if he had actually threatened to harm her, why in the absolute hell was he over at the house that day? And why was he able to go and walk with Lily, just the two of them, if he had done this to her prior? Like, he's just isolating his victim and found a way to brutally end her life. It doesn't make any sense to me. So, it's possible that the family did have no idea about his dark and twisted fantasies that he had, until it was unfortunately too late to stop anything because he had already done this to Lily. Carson had actually strategically planned to launch the attack on Lily by luring her out with him alone onto the trail that day so that no one could protect her, and this is when he just did what he did. Despite knowing just how dangerous Carson truly was, the judge did decide to grant him bail, which really frustrated a lot of people because he was obviously, you know, wasn't a safe individual, wasn't right in the head, and if he could do this to Lily, it's possible that he could do this to other people. Because he was 14 and he couldn't legally drive, and he, obviously, you know, when you're 14, you don't know how to legally drive, so, you know, they said that he wouldn't be considered a flight risk, therefore he didn't need bail or anything. Like, he didn't need any of that. Not only were Carson and Lily related, but the family darkness didn't just start with the murder of Lily. No. It actually goes much deeper than that. It's way more complex than what anyone could have imagined. And it all begins with Carson's mother, who was Lily's aunt. According to multiple social media posts, Carson's mother, Lorraine Davis, had actually exposed her son online for everybody to see. Like, she was just talking shit on her own son. She claimed that Carson had been exposed to and partook in multiple uses of drugs through her. It was not said whether or not he had actually used these drugs or if he was just, you know, around the drugs. But it is possible that this could be the case, that he had taken those drugs. Lorraine also believed that her son was unfortunately exposed to a relationship violence quite early on in his life through his own father. So, wait till y'all hear about his father. His father's just a whole other mess. So, his father, Adam, was said to be very well known to the authorities in the area, and this was because he had quite a lengthy rap sheet, if you know what I mean. Like, he had done a lot of crimes in his life, like a lot. Because of this, it's quite possible that due to being around this lifestyle as a child, Carson really didn't know any better and had been manipulated by his own father. This is just my opinion. There's no proof about it. It's a possibility. Adam T. Berger was 31 years old when he lived at Barlin Street in Eau Claire, I don't know how to pronounce that, Wisconsin. It's something in French, which was said to be approximately 20 minutes away from Chippewa Falls, where Lily and her family lived, along with where Carson lived. It was said that Adam had actually been arrested back in 2016 for possession of drug paraphernalia, and this actually included multiple crack pipes in his home. Along with his pretty severe drug addiction that he had, you know, Adam had also been caught with hundreds of photos of child pornography. And in case you didn't know, like, I personally believe that pedophilia is not considered a sexual orientation or sexual attraction, whatever it may be. I find it absolutely disgusting. You do not think of children in that way. Children are precious little angels, precious babies, and it's just, why? Like, I don't understand how anyone could do that. Like, it's just so disgusting. So, again, if you do tend to defend Adam down below in the comments saying it is in fact a sexual orientation, your comments will be deleted because that's not true. It's disgusting and it's foul. So he was arrested and even brought up in his court trial how the photos that were found on, like, it was brought up in his court trial that the photos that were found on his computer had actually focused on multiple children's genitalia, which is completely disgusting and disturbing, which is possible, you know, like, Carson may have seen that, you know? So Adam was ultimately faced with 100 years in prison with these charges, but for some reason, the sick dude only serves 3 years in prison for that. Like, what in the world? You know, I don't understand why he was out so quickly. Like, he should have served his whole 100-year sentence, but I don't know. That's just me. So after this, Adam was forced to register as a sex offender, and he was then informed that he would have to have supervised visits between him and Carson from now on. So this made him very, very, very upset, and he decided he was going to do whatever he could to get these unsupervised visits with his son Carson, and like I said, he would do whatever it took to get them. Adam later stated that he remembered noticing Carson come in and he was just really unhappy and miserable. He seemed like this because of the fact that he was living with his mother, Lorraine, and he claimed he didn't want to live there anymore because he was just not happy living there. So Lorraine is Lily's biological aunt and the sister of her father, Alex. Lorraine was also reported by other family members to be like this really horrible mother. I'm using quotations because I can't say for a fact that she was a horrible mother. I don't know her. So it's the family member said that she was a really horrible mother and that she really didn't seem to care about her own child. She would often neglect Carson and treated him like he was basically the biggest scum on the earth, and she literally did not want him to be born, and she hated him from the start. Lily and Carson's own grandmother talked to authorities about how anytime, you know, she would see her, sorry, my ear's itching, her grandson Carson, he would often look miserable and just never smiled or talked to anybody. He just kind of sat there and just looked glum. Carson really wasn't a shy kid, but he never seemed to be happy in his family home. You understand what I mean? Like, he just did not like living there. When any of his family members would try to talk to him, he would just stare down at the ground and he would not say anything. He just would be super uncomfortable. It was also claimed by the grandmother, that Lori, the mother of Carson, had refused to allow Carson to have any contact with their family as if she were ashamed of them, and said that he was not allowed to talk to anyone. People really started seeing a change in him once his father was sent to prison, and he was never seen as this happy kid that he once was. It's possible that he had taken out all this frustration about his father being in prison, what had happened to him and his mother, like, acting like he doesn't exist, on Lily, but this is just speculation and has never been proven. It was then said that Lori and Adam were not together very long and had officially separated when Carson was only 2 years old. There was said to be a lot of aggression during the separation period, and in 2017, Lori had actually called the police on Adam because she said that he had actually ran her over with his car and severely injured her. Carson was actually in the car at the time and was 8 years old, and he was not allowed to have these unsupervised visits with his father, but somehow, you know, managed to get into the car with just those two and run over Lori and left. Lori had then spotted a vehicle in the alley that was behind her home, and then she decided to follow this vehicle until it pulled into some random driveway. She then continued on her way, and as she passed the car, Lori saw Adam, and he was indeed the driver of this creepy vehicle. It seemed like he was just kind of stalking her. So Lori had tried to stop the vehicle and demand, why he was stalking her, but this was when Adam quickly backed up with the car and then ran her over with her own son in the car. He then took off with Carson and just left Lori there lying on the ground. It was said that when Adam went to prison, he then remained in contact with his son, and the two of them would often email each other back and forth daily. After this, he petitioned the court to try to get unsupervised visits with Carson, and he stated on May 15th of 2020 that he deserved unsupervised visits because he was the father and he shared the custody of Carson with Lori, and he deserved, he was basically saying because he was the father and put forth the sperm, he was needed to have this one-on-one contact with his son. That's what he was saying. He then brought up how Carson was almost a teenager and they were really close. Remember, he was like 12 at the time. So they really needed to give him custody of Carson because he was just so close to her. Even though he's in prison at the time, he wanted full custody. I don't know. So, of course, the courts ended up denying his request for the unsupervised visits along with going for full custody because he was a child predator and he really couldn't be trusted alone with children. Who's to say he wouldn't try to touch his own son, you know what I mean? Carson's mother, Lori, had also had her own type of charges as well, and this included multiple drug charges along with a battery charge because Lori had actually assaulted her previous husband named John Davis. I believe this was the husband after Carson's father. After the charges, she began dating another convicted sex offender named John Rapito, I think that's how you pronounce it. Not to be confused with the ex-husband John that we just talked about, but he started getting all these comments on his Facebook that basically just blamed him for Lily's death, along with comments on his post, that were making fun of him for posting Ed Gein for president. All of this wasn't bad enough, he had memes on his page that were making jokes about rape. And it got to the point where he just officially deleted his entire Facebook at this point. So, a 14-year-old boy, he murdered his 10-year-old little cousin, and then afterwards he raped her deceased body. Now, that's easy to say. It's easy to say that it's very possible that Carson had been negatively influenced by his own family, his own parents, to do something so horrific to Lily. And what's even more bizarre is that the little girl had been found, how the little girl had been found. And wait till you hear this, because it is just, this case is already extremely wild, but this is the wildest thing I've ever heard. There was an online Reddit user, which if you don't know what Reddit is, it's like this little website where you kind of just I took a poop today, and they have a whole bunch of people that comment down underneath. So this online Reddit user stated to have been playing on the same trail that day that Lily and her cousin were playing on, riding the bike and everything, and noticed Lily in a pink hoodie on her bike with an older boy following close behind her. Someone ends up noticing this Reddit post and immediately notifies the police about the post. It turns out that a lot of people theorize this is how Carson actually got caught, behind the murders and everything. But unfortunately, it's also possible that this wasn't the case, A lot of people all across the nation were not happy that there was not an Amber Alert issued for Lily. They decided to protest for change in certain circumstances because the exact point of an Amber Alert is to ping every phone device or any type of device that can have an Amber Alert on it with a notification about a missing child. And unfortunately, there was never one issued for Lily that night. It is possible, that when everyone noticed that she was missing, that she was already murdered by Carson. But again, this has never been proven. It's just too early to tell. Eric Henry decided to create a petition to begin the Lily Alert for Wisconsin, which is like the Amber Alert, but in Lily's name. And this would help loved ones to find help from authorities quickly to help find their children. The goal of this petition is to get it all the way up to the state senator, Kathy Bernier, so she has no excuse to not push it forward with all the signatures that everyone wants to get. Lilly's cousin and murderer ended up having his second court date on May 5th of 2022, so just last month. His legal team absolutely begged for the courts, to just seal the criminal complaint, but the judge obviously denied this and then released a statement to the public. This statement contains specific information about the things that were found at the crime scene, and the items that were found were directly linked to Carson Berger in relation to the murder of Lilly. So basically, he was the prime suspect. There was no other way it could not have been him. At this point, it became extremely obvious to the jury that he was the one behind this horrible tragedy. There was just so much evidence stacked against him. It's extremely important for this case to also remember that Carson's father was a convicted pedophile, and it's possible that Carson may have experienced his father having these urges, towards children in front of him, and he didn't know any better, and it's possible this could have been ingrained in his brain. He could have looked on his, gone onto the computer one day, looked at his father's child pornography he had there, was just like, oh, didn't realize what was going on, and then got ideas, if you know what I mean. It's also possible that Adam or Carson had actually previously molested Lilly before, because it was said that Carson has threatened her before, but I couldn't find out what was truly said to her during these threats. But I do know it was enough to alarm her, and she told her mother about it. So, unfortunately, that's literally all we have for the updates in this case. It's still an ongoing case. The trial hasn't even, I don't even know if the trial has, fully... Well, the trial just ended. I'm not sure if they're going... I think they said they're going to do another type of a court date or something like that in September. There's something about this case that's going to happen in September. I'll try to do an update on that. But literally, this is all that we know. This is all the information that we have at this time. And I would love to know what you guys think about this case. Do you think that Carson was just born evil? He was a sadistic kid? He was a sadistic teenager? Or do you think that he was influenced by his father and, grew up, seeing this child pornography and then started getting these urges, if you will, towards his cousin and just did this to her? Or maybe he was just mentally disturbed, and as the older he got, the more messed up in his head he became. So let me know what you guys think down below. Do you think he was a killer? Do you think his father influenced him by his behavior? He didn't know any better, just grew up knowing it? Or do you think there was something else that was the case? I would love to know what you guys think. Let me know down below. Don't forget to like this video. Don't forget to subscribe. And don't forget to turn on your post notification bell so that you never miss a video. And comment down below also any type of cases that you would like me to cover. And I will see you guys in my next video. Oh my god, my head is literally killing me because this case has me just so stressed out. It's just so much. It's just, it's disgusting, it's disturbing, it's heartbreaking, it's awful. It's all of those things. It's just one of the worst cases I've ever heard of, and it literally just happened in April. So, I'll see you guys in my next video next week. Don't forget to tune into that one, and I'll see you guys later. Bye!